All rise. All right, you may proceed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I did ask them to try to make an adjustment on the air conditioner. I know it's getting a little warm, so a couple of the fan. The clerk has provided some fans, so if you want a fan, I'll let Debbie get it. I see several hands going. I should go out here for them, so I'll tell you something. Those are fans provided by Debbie Berry, and you're more than welcome to use them if you want to. You don't have to use them. But in other words, you want to make yourself comfortable. I did ask them to lower the temperature. There was a challenge with the air conditioner over the weekend, and they were working on it. But the temperature was rising as we speak, but you're more than welcome to use the fan if you wish. You don't have to. Just provide for your comfort. Let's go ahead and call your next witness.
Your Honor, State Colonel Christine Olivier.
All right. Come on up, young lady.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm testimony you give today the truth, the whole truth, nothing but yourself, you got it?
Yes, I do.
State your name and spell it for the court, please.
It's Christine Marie Oliveira.
Have a seat.
Okay, you have a seat in. Christine, I was going to tell her to speak up. If you could lean forward and
Sure.
speak into that microphone just so we can all hear you.
And would you say your name and you had to spell it, please?
Christine, Christine, Marie, Marie, Oliveira, Olivera.
Christine, how are you employed currently?
Currently, I am a payroll specialist.
And how long have you been a payroll specialist?
For many years.
For many years.
Overtime.
Let me take you back to September of 2010.
Yes, sir.
October of 2010. How were you employed then?
I was a bartender
And where were you a bartender?
at Pulse Lounge.
And so we'll talk about Pulse Lounge in a second, but what city were you living and working in at that point?
Greenville, South Carolina.
And how long had you worked for Pulse as of October of 2010?
A few months, maybe 5 months.
All right, and you said you were a bartender.
That's correct.
All right. What were your duties as a bartender?
Serve drinks, sometimes meals, and that was about it. Just barmaid.
All right. Tell us about the Pulse Lounge. What type of establishment was it?
We were opened probably Tuesday through Saturday, and for late night, probably open around 6 o'clock. Serve drinks, sometimes dinner, depending on the night that it was.
Was this a large establishment, a large place?
Regular bar size, not too large. No, it was average size.
Okay, if you had to sort of give us a dimension.
About the size of the courtroom.
And when you say the courtroom, do you mean beyond the bar here or inside of the bar?
Inside here?
Inside here, inside
Yes.
of this railing that I call the bar?
Yes.
Okay. I want to ask you specifically about October the 21st of 2010. Do you remember that evening?
Yes, I do.
All right. Did you have a man and a woman come in that evening that you waited on?
Yes, I did.
All right. Do you see the man here today that you waited on that evening?
Yes, I do.
Could you identify him?
The defendant.
Okay, and when you say the defendant, can you describe what he's wearing and what he looks like?
Yellow shirt with a beard and tie.
And a beard and a tie. When he came in on that evening, did he have a beard?
No, sir.
So how was his face adorned? Did he have?
Clean shave, short hair, polo shirt, and khaki pants.
And was he by himself?
No, he was with a lady.
And how did this lady appear?
In her mid-30s, probably. Shoulder-length hair, glasses, around 5'3", 5'4".
Now,
Not too tall.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Sorry. Just a woman.
Just a woman. Since this incident, have you had occasion to see this woman in person?
Yes.
Okay. And have you had occasion to actually identify this woman?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Do you know this woman's name now?
Andrea
Sneiderman? All right. Tell us about that night.
It was a really slow night, and I was by myself. The couple came into Pulse. We were playing music, as we did every night. It was a Spanish themed restaurant or bar and lounge. The DJ was playing that evening, and they came in and ordered a couple of drinks.
Right, so let me stop you right there.
Sure.
Your Honor, if I may have permission to publish State's Exhibit number 14 at this point.
You may.
Right, and if we could, may I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
If you could take a look, actually it should be on this
Sure.
screen. It's not on that screen. May the witness step down from the stand at this point?
You may come down.
Stand here or now? Okay, done. On this side. As a matter of fact, you can go back and sit down. They got it.
What is wrong?
It has appeared. Okay.
Wonderful.
All right. So look on that screen. I'll look on this one where it says order and it has a number 4. Could you tell me what that means?
That would indicate how many customers were served that particular night. Apparently, the customer's name, Newman H., was the 4th customer of the evening.
But before you go on, you indicated earlier that it was a slow night. Is that
It was.
what you were referring to when it says 4 customers?
That's correct.
And at the time that this purchase was made, what time was it?
9:36.
Okay. And who was the individual that actually made the purchase?
Newman H.
All right. And it says server. And so tell me about that. Who was that?
It was myself. That was my name. Or it's my name on the receipt.
Okay. And it says table. And what does it say next to that?
Dinner couple, and that didn't mean anything. It just was a code that the restaurant used.
Okay. So you said and so let's pick back up. You said Mr. Newman actually made a purchase. Tell us about that.
He ordered a couple of drinks at the bar,
Okay. When you say drinks, what do you mean?
alcoholic beverage.
Okay. And so then what happened next?
Mr. Newman approached the bar. He had placed the order. Andrea then excused herself to go and use the restroom. She had taken her phone. She appeared to be upset.
Okay. So let's talk about that. You said she appeared to be upset. What about her demeanor led you to believe that Andrea was upset?
She was physically, like you can tell on her face, she was upset. She wasn't happy at the moment, and kind of like talking to him, and she excused herself to use the restroom, grabbed her phone, and went off.
Was she in any way animated? Anything she did with her
A
hand?
little bit. When she came back, she kind of looked like she had been crying.
Okay.
And when she stepped away to excuse herself, Mr. Newman then approached me and said, that this was going to be really good for her. This was a great environment, what she had needed. She was dealing with a real jerk back at home.
She was dealing with a real jerk back home.
Yes, sir.
Did you respond when she said, when Mr. Newman said she was dealing with a real jerk back home?
No, sir.
Okay, so tell us what happened next.
Andrea then comes back, and she brushed off whatever seemed to have been bothering her.
How do you know she brushed it off? What gave you that impression?
She was standing there and she's like, kind of like, I'm not going to let it bother me, let it, whatever it is that's going on. That's the gesture that she made. Kind of brushed it off, and they were talking, then went out to, they had their drink and then went out to the dance floor.
So before we get to the dance floor, how long had Andrea been away in the restroom before she came back to the bar and brushed it off?
About 3 to 5 minutes, no?
About 3 to 5 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. And you said she comes back and you started talking about the dance floor. Tell us about that.
They had the entire dance floor to themselves, and it was about the space of this area here.
When you say this area here, are you referring from what I described as the bar back here that separates the courtroom from the gallery? Or?
Yes, about there to about here.
Okay.
This would be like a good. This would be the door. This would be the dance floor, and over here, exactly would be further back would be where the DJ was.
And when you point to your right and say over here, you're talking about in the direction of the jury?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Where was the bar in relation to the dance floor?
Right where I am.
Okay. All right. And where were they when they were on the dance floor?
They were right in front of me.
Okay. About how far away from you would you say?
Right here from where the court reporter, or the front of the court reporter's podium.
From the front of the court,
Yeah.
where I'm standing right
Yes,
now?
sir.
This close?
This close.
Okay. So tell us what happened next.
The DJ was playing Spanish music. Mr. Neumann then took Andrea by the hand and started kind of twirling her around.
When you say twirling around, how do you mean?
Twirling her around, he'd grabbed her by her hand and spun her around.
And so she would spin like so.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And then at one point, Andrea, I guess, didn't have his hand, and she kind of pulled back and was dancing for him.
When you say dancing for him,
Dancing, she was standing in front of him and kind of, shaking her stuff and dancing for him. She was flirting. You could tell that, they were flirting and
shaking her stuff like moving.
Shaking her hips, she was dancing.
Okay, and how was he responding?
He was excited. He then mentioned that she was a trained dancer and that this was great. And then Andrea was dancing a little bit more.
And then Andrea was dancing a little bit more. Was there ever a time that Andrea stopped dancing for him and started dancing with him?
Yes, they did embrace. He had her hands on her rear.
He had her hands on her rear?
He had his hands on her rear, excuse me.
Okay, and when you say rear, what do you mean?
Her backside?
Her buttocks?
Her buttocks, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
They were dancing. They pop kissed.
Okay, so let me stop you before we get to the kiss.
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Neumann has his hands on Andrea's rear end.
Yes, sir.
Okay, what are they doing as he's standing there with his hands on her rear end?
Dancing.
Okay, dancing. Is anything touching other than his hands to her rear
They're
end?
kind of grinding on each other. I mean,
And when you say grinding on each other, what do you mean?
their bodies were rubbing against each other.
Genital to genital?
Yeah. Yes, I guess so. Yes.
Okay, and how is Andrea responding during this time that they're grinding on one another?
They both seemed like they were welcoming their embrace, so they seemed fine.
Is she touching him, or is he just touching
They
her?
were both touching each other.
How was she touching him?
She had her arms around him. I mean, they were hugging each other, embracing, dancing close together.
You mentioned the kiss. Tell me about the kiss.
At one point, they pop kissed,
What does pop kiss mean?
just to press their lips against one another.
Okay. Who kissed who?
At one point, he kissed her, but there was another time where she had kissed him,
Okay.
where she was dancing and kind of that whole exchange between them flirting on the dance floor. She went up and kissed him.
So let's start with his kiss. So when he, being Mr. Neumann,
Yes,
the
sir.
defendant, kissed Andrea, how did Andrea respond?
She didn't push away. I mean, she kissed him back.
Okay, and when Andrea kissed the defendant, how did the defendant respond?
Happily. I mean, he didn't push back either.
Okay, go ahead.
After that, they approached the bar. I believe Mr. Neumann had mentioned that he had really enjoyed it. The music was great. It was the month of October, and we were having a Halloween party at the end of the month. I mentioned to them that they should come out if they really liked it, that we were going to have a costume party, and they should come out for Halloween. They finished up.
How did he respond when you
He said that would be great. I think we had an invitation, some printed flyers on the bar, and he had shown her that maybe this was something that they could come back for. He did mention that they were staying in a hotel in downtown Greenville, just a couple of blocks away, and they finished their drinks and they left.
So tell me about when they left. How did they
They left
leave?
embraced. In the front of the bar, there was a bunch of windows to the street. You could see the sidewalk. The front door was a double glass door. So the bar was right here. The door would be right where that podium is. And they left embraced, arm in arm, and they kissed each other as they had made their way to this window, which was directly to the bar. You can see them kiss, and they left.
And you make this motion with your hand to your face. So what do you mean?
They pop kissed again. They pressed their lips against each other, and they left.
Did they both seem happy?
Yes, they did. At that time, she had seemed like she was in better spirits, and whatever was bothering her at the beginning wasn't bothering her now.
Your Honor, I have nothing further at this point.
Ms. Sampson, you may examine if you wish.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And all of this was on October 21st, is
That's
that
correct.
right? And they arrived about 9:30?
Say they arrived around 8-ish, between that time.
Okay. So the time on the receipt, is that when they cash out or when they arrive?
That's when they cashed out.
Ah, okay. So they arrive about 8, they leave about 9:30.
Around that time, yes.
And this day was a couple of days before your sister's wedding?
That's correct.
Okay. And is that part of how you remembered this event?
Yes.
Now, when they first arrived, you said that she seemed upset.
That's correct.
And did she look like she'd been crying when they arrived, or she looked like she'd been crying in the bathroom?
She looked like she was upset when she arrived and then was crying when she came out of the bathroom.
Okay.
She had glasses on. It was really hard to tell, but you could tell that she was upset.
Okay. Did she seem upset with him or upset with
Whatever
something?
other situation, they did not seem upset at each other, no.
And I think you said he seemed to be trying to console her or cheer her up.
That's correct. I believe he put his arm on her back, kind of, comforting her.
And you described when they were dancing that he was spinning her around.
That's correct.
And then at some point she's dancing for him.
Yes, ma'am.
And you said she was flirting, so she's basically trying to entice him or trying to put on a show for him?
Kind of like seduce him, I guess, in a danceful way.
And there was nobody else
No,
in
ma'am,
the
they
restaurant?
had the restaurant to themselves other than myself and the DJ that was in the back. It was just the three of us on the floor.
Okay. And you said he had his hands at one point on her rear end
That's
and they
correct.
were kind of grinding against each other?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you indicated that when she was in the restroom, he came over and he was talking to you. What was his demeanor, or how was he acting?
He was fine. He was in a good mood. He seems happy. He had mentioned that this bar was great, the music was great, and that this was just what they needed. And that was it. He was making small talk, but he seemed happy.
Okay. Do you remember at some point describing him as giddy?
He was giddy. He seemed happy to be with her.
And I think you mentioned that he kept saying, "This is great, this is great."
He was saying, "This is great." I think he was having a good time. He seemed to be enjoying himself, especially when she was dancing for him. They seemed like a couple having a good time.
Okay. Now, did he seem more excited about being together and all of this than she was, or did they both seem equally?
At the beginning, he seemed like he was in a better mood. As the evening progressed and they were dancing, they both seemed like they were equally happy.
And you specifically remembered her kissing him as well as him kissing her.
That's correct.
And did they seem like a couple?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you.
Can you read it right?
1 second, Your Honor.
Oh, you may. Get back on the record.
No, sir, no redirect.
Lawyer has made his witness be released and excused from her subpoena. Do you want her to remain on the stand?
No objection, Mr. Taylor.
Any objection? No objection. Thanks for coming. You're free to go. Have a good day, young lady. Thank you, sir. Call your next witness. You're welcome.
Your Honor, the state calls Jan Da Silva.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give today the truth, the whole truth, nothing but yourself, you God?
Yes, sir.
State your name and spell it for the court, please.
Jan Da Silva, JanDaSilva.
All right. And Mr. Da Silva, what do you do now for work?
I currently run and I'm a director of operations for a multinational company down in Puerto Rico.
In Puerto Rico?
Yeah.
Did you come up for this
Yes, ma'am.
event? Thank you. And in 2010, what were you doing for work?
I was going to school and valeting.
Where were you going to school?
Kennesaw State University.
Okay. And where were you living at the time? Not the address, but the general area.
Bucket.
Okay. So you're living in Buckhead, you are going to school at Kennesaw, and what are you doing, you said, for employment?
Valeting.
Okay. And where were you valeting?
Any Bucket Live restaurant group restaurants that they had in the area, like the Atlanta Fish Market, Kima, Bucket Diner.
Okay. Buckhead Life Group, that's a couple of restaurants, the same company owns a couple of different restaurants?
Yep.
Is that right? At that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And were you assigned to one particular restaurant, or would you go wherever they needed you on a given night?
Anywhere where they needed me around on a week.
All right. I want to direct your attention to 2010. In 2010, specifically in October of 2010, did you own any firearms?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you own a Bersa Thunder .40 caliber?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Tell the jury a little bit about when did you get that gun?
If I'm not mistaken, it was in April 8th, 2010. I bought it at Nick's gun store and firearm.
Okay, let me stop you 1 second. All right, so you bought the gun in April 2010?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you, was that the only gun you had at the time?
No, I had a rifle also at that time.
And had you ever served in the military or had any experience with firearms?
Yes, ma'am. I was in the military, U.S. Navy.
Okay, for how many years?
2005 to 2008.
Okay. All right. Did you have a particular purpose in mind when you bought this Versa .40 caliber handgun?
No, it was just recreational.
Okay. Did there come a time in 2010 when you wanted to sell that weapon?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Before you do, I want you, may I approach the witness, Your Honor? I know you told the jury, but I want to make sure I heard it right. Where did you buy this weapon in April of 2010?
It was a store around Smyrna, Georgia, named Nick's Fire Guns, or I really don't know exactly the name, but it was Nick's.
Nick's, okay, and it was a gun store. It was a store licensed to sell firearms.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Did you have to fill out any paperwork when you bought that gun at Nick's gun store?
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of paperwork did you have to fill out?
The firearms transaction record.
Are you familiar with that document?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. I've shown you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit number 29. Do you recognize State's Exhibit number 29?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you recognize State's Exhibit number 29?
It was a form that I fill in to get the firearm.
All right. And do you see your signature on that document?
Yes, ma'am.
It's the original document that you submitted?
I think this will be a copy, but yeah.
All right.
It's a copy from the
It's
original.
an accurate copy?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. You recognize your signature and your information on it?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have to provide the store with any other information other than what they asked you for on that form?
No, it's a GA license, Georgia license.
Yeah, a photo ID?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. At this time, the state moves State's Exhibit number 29 into evidence.
And objection, whose witness is this? Number 29?
Is that a form that, can we see State's Exhibit number 29, please? Is that a form that Nick's gun store, that's individual or particular to that store?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
If you know.
Sustain, rephrase.
Mr. Da Silva, have you bought other weapons before at other gun stores?
Yes, and this is a universal form that every gun store will have you fill in. This is a federal document.
When you were asked to fill out that document, were you given the option, or was that mandatory? You had to fill that out.
Mandatory.
When you bought that weapon from Nick's gun store, what, if anything, came with it?
Came with a box, 2 magazines, and a casing.
Okay.
without going into too much detail for the jurors who might not be as familiar with you about firearms, what's a magazine?
It will be, it's just where you put all your bullets and then they all, I just know that's a magazine, really.
Is a magazine something that you use to insert the bullets into the gun?
Yep.
And then the bullets come out of the gun from the magazine?
Yeah, you just got it's like a cartridge. You put all your bullets, you put it into the gun, and that's what makes it semi-automatic.
Is a semi-automatic weapon?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And is .40 caliber, in your experience, the kind of gun that you bought, is that large caliber or small caliber?
I'll say it's a medium size
caliber? All right. Anything else come with the weapon when you bought it? The box you bought it in, the gun itself, and then 2 magazines?
Yep, and casing.
What's a casing?
A casing will be, you have a bullet which is implemented into a casing. And once you shoot the gun, the bullet comes out, and then you have what you finish off with, it's with a casing. And it comes with a casing just to show the person who's buying the gun that it's been fired and it works properly.
Okay, so the casing that the store gave you was a casing that had actually been fired from the weapon that you bought. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And they give it to you so that you know that the gun's in working order, it's been fired before.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that right? Okay. What'd you do with that casing when you got it in April of 2010?
I gave it to the person who I was having a relationship with at that time.
Okay, and who was the person you were having a relationship with at that time?
Aurora Juarez.
Okay.
Can you spell her name, please?
AURORAGUAREZ.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so you bought the gun in April 2010, and then tell me, when did it come a time that you wanted to sell the gun?
It was around October that I decided that I wanted to sell the gun.
October of what year?
2010.
2010, the same year you bought it?
If I'm not mistaken, yeah.
Just a couple months later? All right. And what was it that you were unhappy about, or why did you want to sell it?
By that time, I was doing other recreational sport and was skydiving, and I just needed the money to pay for the lessons and get certified.
Okay. Now, did you take the gun back to Nick's and ask for your money back?
No.
Okay. How did you go about selling the gun?
I went online and I looked at this website where you can list your gun and sell it online.
Do you remember what the website was?
Gunlisting.org.
All right. And is that a site that you can sell anything on?
Just firearms.
Just firearms? All right. How did it work? How did you, when you put up a gun for sale through this online listing, how does that work? How do you get in touch with people, or how do people get in touch with you?
So you go online and you basically do an account with them, and you post whatever you're trying to sell. In this case, I was selling the Versa 40, and just if some buyer wants to buy it, they go and look at my listing and they write an email, and they'll send me an email directly to my email.
Does the person who's interested in the weapon, do they email you directly?
Yes, ma'am.
They email you directly? Okay. Did you in fact put up your weapon, the Versa 40? Did you put it up for sale on that website?
Yes, ma'am.
Service?
Yeah.
And did you get any response?
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of response did you get?
I got one that they were interested in buying my gun.
Do you know who the interested party was?
Yes, ma'am.
Who was the interested party?
Hemy Neuman.
Now, did you know Mr. Newman?
No.
Did you know him personally at the time?
No, ma'am.
Did he identify himself as Hemy Neuman at that time?
With the email, had his name, and by the time we did the transaction, yes.
Okay, at some point?
Yeah.
All right. Did you respond to the email?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was your response?
Just to coordinate a date where we can meet and just make the transaction.
Okay. What was the date that the defendant, or the person that you later identified as Hemy Neuman, what was the date that person first contacted you asking whether the weapon was sold or sale?
The date, the actual date, I wouldn't.
Do you recall right now as you sit there?
I can't recall right now as I sit here. Yes, ma'am.
You want to pitch the witness?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 32 just for identification purposes. And I want you to take a look at it and see if it refreshes your memory about the date that you were first contacted about the gun from someone who identified himself as the defendant, Mr. Neuman?
Yeah, I do recognize the email.
Do you now remember the date it was that Mr. Neuman contacted you about the gun?
October 26th,
Of what year?
2010.
October 26th. And after this initial email, what contact was there between the two of you?
Before this email, there was no contact. And after this, we decided to try to get the transaction being made on around Halloween Day. I think it was that weekend, October 31st.
October 31st?
Which by that time I was actually at the drop zone, which is the place where you go skydiving. And I just couldn't make it to the meeting.
The first time you tried to arrange
the first time we tried to arrange this transaction.
Did you try and were you successful in ever meeting with the defendant to talk about the gun?
Yes, afterwards, he, if I'm not mistaken, he sent me another email regarding if I was still if I was agreeing to sell him the gun and everything, and which I say yes, and we decided to come up with another date, and I did actually meet with him a second try.
The second try. All right, and when we're talking all this email, you missed the first appointment, then arrange the second one. How long a period of time are we talking about after that initial email communication?
I would say just days.
Just
really.
days?
Yeah.
Within a couple days?
Yeah, within a couple of days.
Okay. How much were you selling the gun for?
$375.
And how did you request payment?
Cash.
Cash. All right. If you know, Mr. Da Silva, had you ever sold a gun before?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If you know, are you a licensed gun?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are you licensed to sell weapons?
Not to sell weapons.
Not to sell weapons. And to your knowledge, was any paperwork required for the transaction if you sold your weapon as a private party to another private person?
No, ma'am.
You didn't have to have him fill out or anybody fill out that kind of paperwork?
No,
that
ma'am.
You did?
No, ma'am.
All right. So what happened next? Did there come a time when you ever did meet the defendant in person to talk about the gun?
Yes, ma'am. It was during the evening, and it was in Atlanta Fish Market.
Atlanta Fish Market. What were you doing at Atlanta Fish Market?
I was actually working.
You were working as a valet at that night?
Yes, ma'am.
Or was it during the daytime or during the nighttime?
It was around evening, nighttime.
All right. And had you arranged to meet there?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Tell the jury a little bit about what happened on that evening.
We actually exchanged a couple of phone calls just to make sure that he was the one coming up to buy my gun. He told me the car that he was driving, and by the time he showed up, I recognized the car. And
you remember what kind of car he was driving?
It was a Honda Odyssey, white.
Anybody else in the car with him?
No, just him.
All right. What happened next?
He stayed inside the car. We basically hit it off with a conversation about he noticed that I had a Spanish accent. He asked me where I was from. I told him that I was from Puerto Rico. He told me that he actually was also from Puerto Rico. He even talked to me in Spanish. Afterwards, he also...
Was his Spanish pretty good?
Not that good.
Okay. Did you talk about anything else?
Then he mentioned about, we were talking about Georgia Tech. I actually have an uncle that graduated from Georgia Tech, and we also had that in common.
That was your connection to Georgia Tech. Did the defendant tell you if he had a connection to Georgia Tech?
Yeah, he said that he was from Georgia Tech as well, and he had some kids actually attending Georgia Tech.
Okay. Did the defendant ever get out of the car?
No, ma'am.
He stayed in the car the whole time?
He stayed in the car the whole time.
All right. And did you bring a weapon with you to work that night?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have it on you?
No, I had it inside my vehicle.
Okay. All right. And once you had this initial conversation with the defendant when he's still in the car and you're outside the car, or are you outside the car?
I'm outside the car.
Okay. Did you ever get in the car with him?
No, ma'am.
Okay. What happened next?
Afterwards, I went down and get the gun from my car, asked him why he wanted it. He told me that basically it was for house protection.
When you asked him why he wanted it, were you making conversation, kind of casual conversation, or was that a question that...
Just casual conversation.
And what did he tell you he wanted it for?
A home defense.
Home defense?
Yes, ma'am.
You remember him saying anything else about why he needed a gun?
No, just that, home defense.
Okay. And what happened next?
I showed him the gun, asking if he knew how to use it. He wasn't that familiarized with the firearm.
It didn't look. What made you think that he wasn't real familiar with firearms?
Just the way when I asked him about it, he just responded that he really wasn't that. He didn't know how to use them really.
Did he handle the weapon in your experience like someone who had handled a lot of weapons before?
No, before actually even I gave it to him, I pretty much show him just the functionality of the firearm, and afterwards I gave it to him.
All right. And he took it from you?
I gave it to him.
You gave it to him?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Was it in the box?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you take it out of the box when you were showing him how it worked?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he handle it in your presence?
Yes, ma'am.
What, if anything, did he say about whether he wanted to purchase the gun?
No, it was just the home defense.
Did he tell you that he did want to buy the gun from you, or now that he had seen that he didn't want to buy
Oh
the gun?
no, yeah, he wanted to buy the gun. Yes, ma'am.
And did you sell it to him there on the spot?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What did he give you?
He gave me all $400, which or $380. I'm sorry, $380, all in 20s, and I gave him change back.
You gave him change back. How much were you selling it for?
$375.
$375.
He paid full.
Okay. And what, if anything, besides the gun in the box, did you give him?
I also gave him a box of target ammunition and some hollow point home defense or defensive ammunition.
All right, let me stop you there 1 second. Target ammunition, what's target ammunition?
It will be a full, it's target ammunition. It's just a full bullet. It's a whole bullet with bronze and it's just all metal.
Okay. And had you got that ammunition when you bought the gun at Nick's, or did you get it sometime later after you had it?
No, I got it later.
Okay. And that was ammunition that just fit that gun?
Yes, ma'am. It was 40 caliber.
40 caliber? Okay. All right. That was the target. Was it, how much of that ammunition did you give him?
I would say like around 80 or 100.
80 or 100 bullets?
Yeah.
Okay. And what else did you give him?
I gave him hollow points as well.
All right. What's hollow points?
Hollow points will be used, is an ammunition used for defense.
And how much of that ammunition did you give him?
Around 50.
Around 50?
50 bullets.
50 bullets? All right. Anything else?
No. A cleaning kit as well.
A cleaning kit?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you give the magazines that had come with the gun too?
Yes, ma'am.
Those 2 magazines that fit it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Hey, Mr. Da Silva, you see the person that you sold that burst of thunder 40 caliber weapon to in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am.
And who is that person?
He's standing right over there with the second from left to right.
At the defense table?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me what he's wearing?
He's wearing a yellow button shirt with a yellow and blue diamond or some figures on his tie.
And does he look the same as he did back in 2010?
No, ma'am. No.
What looks different about him?
He has a full-grown beard, and he's wearing a hat.
All right. Your Honor, the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
Record may so reflect.
Thank you. Now, any other conversation? Anything else happened in that first meeting with the defendant?
No, that was it. After that, he took the gun. He took everything I gave him. I took my money. He left and kept working till I got home.
The defendant's demeanor during this exchange, anything unusual about it?
No, I even asked him for his ID. He showed me his license, his Georgia license, just to make sure that he was a Georgia resident.
And why'd you do that?
It's one of those requirements if you do a private firearm transaction.
Okay. Do you have to make a copy of it, or do you just have to see it?
You got to make sure that he's a Georgia resident.
All right. And you did that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. After that, did you ever see the defendant again?
I did see the defendant again.
And what was the occasion that you had to see the defendant after you sold him the gun on or about October 31st, 2008?
It was out of the blue. There was no phone calls, no emails, no text message. He just showed up to where I was working at the Buckhead Diner.
You were at the Buckhead Diner that night?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you working as valet that night?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. You know how he got to you?
To my knowledge, he actually went to the fish market to look for me. And
Because
guys...
that's where you had met the first time.
Yes, ma'am.
And somebody directed him to where you were working that night?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Tell me about the second encounter with him.
He showed up to the Buckhead Diner. He asked me if I recognized him, which I did. And
You recognized him right away?
yes, ma'am. And he was telling me that, yeah, I'm the person you sold the gun to. And he basically told me that he had some troubles or something went wrong with the firearm.
And what was your response when he told you something went wrong with the firearm?
I thought it wasn't working properly, and I guess he was coming to just to tell me about it. I actually thought that he was eating at the restaurant by that time.
And how long after you had sold him the weapon did he come back and find you that night when you were working at the Buckhead Diner?
I would say like a month, because this was in Thanksgiving season.
All right, so if you sold it to him on or about the 31st of October, it was about a month later around Thanksgiving?
Yes, ma'am.
That's late November 2010?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, so he told you that something went wrong with the gun. What else did he say?
He also told me that that wasn't the problem. The gun was fine. He actually had to get rid of it, but I
He had
went
to get rid of it?
rid of it. Yes, ma'am.
Did you say anything when he told you he had to get rid of the new gun that he had just bought from you?
Basically, he said that he had to get rid of it. He tossed it somewhere where no one can find it. And later on, he asked me if I wanted to know why, which I told him, yes, I wanted to know why. And basically, once I responded that, he told me, don't ever have a mistress. And after he told me don't ever have a mistress, he said that because of that, his family knew about what was going on. And for some reason, the gun, I guess he involved the gun into a family altercation. And the family just didn't like what they were seeing, and he had to get rid of the gun.
That's
fast.
what he told you about why he had to get rid of the gun.
Yes, ma'am.
What'd you say?
Basically, I told him that it was okay. I was kind of shocked, and it was like an awkward moment. He then later came to me, and he said that because of what was going on with the firearm, that he needed to make sure that there were people that were going to contact me.
What kind of people were going to contact you?
He said some investigators.
Investigators?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he ask you to do anything or suggest you do anything if investigators came to talk to you?
When he said that supposedly some investigators were going to come and ask me about him and the firearm, he basically asked me to come up with a story of how I met him and not involve him and the transaction of the firearm.
A story that didn't involve a gun?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
What'd you say?
I said it was fine, and I even told him that, look, I know you for, you told me that you were from Georgia Tech, my uncle's from Georgia Tech, I know your kids are actually going from Georgia Tech, I got a couple of friends from Georgia Tech, so if that comes to be something that happens, I was just going to tell him that I know you because I was trying to find an internship for my friends from Georgia Tech.
And why do you offer them that kind of cover story when he was asking you to lie to investigators if they came?
Just because of the whole situation, and I was working, and it was all awkward, and I just didn't feel I wasn't even feeling comfortable around him. That's why I just agreed to everything, just to make sure that everything passed quickly, and he could just go his way, and I'll go my way.
Okay. Did you really intend to lie to the police if they ever contacted you?
No, ma'am.
All right. Did he do anything or say anything or suggest anything that made that would have motivated you to lie to police if you were contacted?
He didn't offer me, after we finished the whole discussion, he actually even offered me some money. He came, he put his hand inside his pocket and he showed me, I don't know the whole quantity of it, but it showed a couple of 20s, which I told him not to, that he didn't have to pay me anything, that it was all fine, it was okay.
Now, you said this encounter was really awkward, and you agreed with them, offered this kind of cover story to end the conversation. When you say that it was awkward, can you describe what was the defendant's demeanor?
He looked kind of worried. And he was talking really fast, and it just, I don't know how to explain it to you, but it's just the vibe that it gave me. I wasn't feeling any comfortable having this person around me.
All right. What happened next?
He then walked away from the restaurant and he left. I kept working. I was valeting and I kept working.
All right. He ever contact you again?
No, ma'am.
Did you tell anybody about this conversation after that?
Yes, after a couple of minutes after that, I knew that at the restaurant next to the Bucket Island, which is Kima, they had a security, ADP police officer, just doing rounds around the parking lot.
APD, is that Atlanta Police Department?
Atlanta Police Department.
And an Atlanta Police Department officer was working like part-time, an off part-time job?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So I approached the police officer and I told him exactly what happened to me. And
why'd you do that?
just because of how I felt about the situation. I was worried for my sake, and I just needed to talk to, a police officer so I can get just a recommendation on what to do in this kind of situation.
All right. And then after that, did you do anything after talking to the Atlanta Police Department officer?
No, after I actually talked to the police officer, he told me that if it was in regards of how I sold the gun and everything, I did it correctly and I shouldn't be worried about. And I just went home after that.
Did there come a time when investigators did come ask you about selling this Versa .40 caliber weapon?
Yes, ma'am.
When was that? Do you remember?
At the exact date, I just can't remember. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It was a couple days later, a couple weeks later?
No, it was quite some time later.
Quite some time later?
Yeah.
And what did they ask you about?
They identified themselves on the phone, and they asked me if I sold a firearm in the past, which I told them yes. They asked me which firearm, I told them which was, and they needed to talk to me, and which I agreed that I would anytime at any place I would talk to them about it.
All right. Mr. Da Silva, Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked in 6 exhibits number 30 and 31. Mr. Da Silva, do you recognize 6 exhibit number 30 and 31?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you recognize those exhibits?
These were the forms that the detectives or the persons that came to talk to me about the situation with the firearm that I sold.
All right, so after they called you on the phone, did you then meet with some investigators?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and did they show you anything or ask you to do anything when they met with them, when they met with you?
Yeah, they pretty much asked me about if I did remember the person who I sold the gun to, how was the gun, what caliber, and all the other stuff. And they come up and they told me that they needed to do this procedure for me because they were going to show me a lineup of certain individuals.
And do you see the lineup that they showed you there in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
How is there a number on it?
Yes, ma'am.
What's the number on it?
State Exhibit 31, and they show me 6 individuals, which I responded to select number 4.
Okay, before you tell me anything, that is State's Exhibit number 31. Is that the lineup that they showed you?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Your Honor, at this time, I'd ask State's Exhibit number 31 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection to 30 or 31?
No objection.
All right, 31 can be admitted without objection. Ladies and gentlemen.
All right, thank you. And did you fill out any paperwork? Well, let me first, can we see State's Exhibit number 31, please, the lineup?
You may.
Mr. Da Silva, do you see, it's on the screen there in front of you as well. State's Exhibit number 31, that's the lineup you were shown?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did the police officers ask you to do?
Just identify if I see the person who I sold the gun to.
And did you in fact see the person who you had sold the gun to?
Yes, ma'am.
And what number is that person?
It will be
in that
number
photographic
4.
lineup? That's number 4?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's who you identified to be the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Did they ask you to fill out any paperwork after you identified the defendant? Picture number 4 there.
Yes, ma'am.
And State's Exhibit number 31? They did ask you to do some paperwork?
Yeah, it will be this paperwork.
State's Exhibit number 30 here in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you see your signature on it?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, let me ask you, the day that you first were contacted by investigators, is that the same day they showed you the lineup?
Yes, ma'am.
So they called you and then you met with them in person?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you sign that piece of paper the same day?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, this time the state moves State's Exhibit number 30 into evidence.
Any objection to 30?
Go, Your Honor.
All right, 30 is admitted without objection.
Thank
may
you.
continue.
What's the date on that document, Mr. Da Silva?
February 22nd, 2011.
And February 22nd, 2011, was that the first time that any police officer had contacted you asking either about the gun that you sold or about any contact you have with the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
State's Exhibit number 30 there, does that indicate which picture you picked out?
Yes, ma'am.
And what does that form indicate, the picture that you picked out?
Number 4.
Number 4, the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
At the time, Mr. Da Silva, that you picked out the defendant from the lineup, had you ever seen him in between the time that the 2 conversations you had with him that you told us about and the time they showed you this lineup?
No.
You didn't see him again?
Didn't see him
Did he
again.
try to contact you again?
No, ma'am.
Did you see him on TV?
No, ma'am.
Do anything else with that casing in between the time you bought the gun in April and in between the time police came to ask you about it in February 2011?
No, ma'am.
What, if anything, happened next?
Well, after all the lineup and all the paper filing that I was doing, I told the investigators that I actually think of that there was a way that we could get a casing from that gun. And I told them that Aurora Juarez had it with her.
Okay. And did you give investigators her information for them to contact?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Da Silva. I don't have any other questions, but the defense might have a few questions for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I'm sorry, Your Honor, just to make sure the record is clear, the state, if I haven't already moved states number 29, 30, and 31 into evidence.
You said 29, 30, 31.
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, 29, 30, 31 is admitted without objection. You may continue.
32, Your Honor, was not offered for admission. It was just used to refresh the recollection of the witness.
All right. Anything else, counsel?
No, sir.
All right. Ms. Hanson, you may cross-examine if you wish.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
When you decided to sell this gun, you ran a listing on a website,
Yes, ma'am.
and that was open to anyone searching, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you included your email address on that site.
Yes, ma'am.
And when Mr. Neuman contacted you, he gave you his name,
Yes, ma'am.
and you had his email address.
Yes, ma'am.
And you said when you met with him, you also got his driver's license?
When I met with him, he showed me his driver's license.
Okay. And that was the same name he had given you?
Yes, ma'am.
And had you checked to see what you were required to do for a private sale?
Yes, ma'am.
And had you ever purchased a handgun as a private sale?
No, ma'am.
Had you ever sold any other handgun?
As a private sale, yes.
Okay. So this wasn't your first time?
It was my second time.
And you said when you saw him the second time, when he came back, he was talking very fast?
Yeah, he was, from the first time that I met him, he was acting differently.
Okay. Tell me what you mean by acting differently.
First of all, he shows up out of the blue. And he was really anxious, trying to explain me what happened with the gun. And he didn't hesitate at all telling me the story of what happened and why he threw the gun to the lake.
Okay, and you said he was speaking quickly?
Yes, ma'am.
Basically seemed agitated or overly energetic?
I would just say that he wasn't acting normal.
And you had never met him before, correct?
I met him once at the fish market.
Okay, but before he contacted you about this sale, you had never met him?
Oh, never.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Can you redirect?
Just briefly, hey, Mr. Da Silva, would you describe the defendant's demeanor as nervous when you saw him that second time?
I just felt indifferently. If I were to describe it as a person being nervous and kind of agitated or something bothering him mentally, then I would say yes.
He looked guilty to you?
He was somehow afraid when he was telling me the story and when we were coming up with the story that I was going to be telling the investigators.
Did he give you the impression he was telling you the truth about the story of why he had to get rid of the gun?
To be honest with you, like I said, I was just feeling really uncomfortable with the whole ordeal that was going around me, that I just wanted to accept everything that he was saying just to get him out of the lot.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Da Silva.
You're welcome.
Any recalls?
No, Your Honor.
Lawyers, may this witness be released and excused from subpoena. Do you want him to remain in subpoena?
He's released from the state, Your Honor.
Any objections?
No, Your Honor.
You're free to go ahead with your plea, young man.
Thank you.
Have a safe flight. All right, next witness.
At this time, the state calls for Aurora Juarez.
Go ahead and have a seat for me. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may lower your hand. Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Aurora Juarez. First name Aurora, last name Juarez.
Ms. Juarez, do you know Jan Da Silva?
Yes,
How do you know Jan Da Silva?
he's my ex-boyfriend.
Okay. How long have you all known each other?
About 5 years.
Okay. And were you did you know Jan Da Silva back in 2010?
Yes,
Okay. And in April of 2010, were you dating him at that point?
yes,
Okay. Were you with him when he purchased a handgun?
yes.
Okay. Did he give you anything after that purchase?
He gave me the shell casing.
Okay. And what did you do with that shell casing?
I kept it as a memory. It was our first, I guess, gun purchase together. First time I went shooting, so I kept it as a memory.
Okay. And where did you keep it?
At my house,
Okay.
Where I
Do
live.
you recall where you had it in your house?
it was in a box, like a memory box in my bedroom.
Okay. And after he gave you that casing and you put it in that memory box, Did you just leave it there, or did you do anything else with it prior to investigators contacting you?
No, I just left it there.
Okay. And at some point, were you contacted by investigators asking you about that casing?
Yes, Mark Potter contacted me.
Okay. Is that Mark Potter that works for the DeKalb County District Attorney's
Yes.
Office? Okay. And you said he contacted you about that shell casing. Did you know when he contacted you where that shell casing was?
Yes.
Okay. And did you ever at any point meet with him over that regarding that shell casing?
Yes, he came to my house to get it.
Okay. And did you then turn it over to him?
Yes.
Okay. Now, just to be clear, did you have a bunch of other shell casings lying around in your memory box?
No.
Okay. Was that the only shell casing you had?
Yes.
Okay. So when he asked you, when Mark Potter asked you for the shell casing from the gun that Jan Da Silva bought back in April of 2010, was there any way that you confused that shell casing with any other shell casing?
No.
After Mark Potter gave you that shell casing, was that it? He just gave it to you? You gave it to him and that was the end of it?
Yes.
Okay. I might have one moment.
You may.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Ms. Sampson, this is your witness.
No questions.
No questions, lawyer. You may this witness be released and excused from subpoena. Do you want her to remain on the subpoena?
She can be released.
Any objection?
No objection.
Thank you, young lady. Free to go. Have a good afternoon. Drive safe. Call your next witness.
Can I have the state cause investigator Mark Potter?
You may.
Go ahead and have a seat for me. Go ahead and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony shall give this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir, I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Mark Potter, M-A-R-K, P-O-T-T-E-R.
And Investigator Potter, can you tell the jurors where are you employed right now?
I'm employed with the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office.
And back in November 2010 through the early part of 2011, were you still employed in the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And what's your job there?
I'm sorry?
What's your job there? What do you do?
I'm an investigator assigned to the Homicide Division at that point.
Okay. Did you have any involvement into the investigation into the murder of Rusty Sneiderman?
Yes, ma'am.
Did your involvement in that case require you to have any contact with a witness named Jan Da Silva?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the jurors what was your contact with Mr. Da Silva?
I was able to locate Mr. Da Silva through Mr. Newman's phone records. And when I called the number, I spoke to Mr. Da Silva. He informed me that he had sold a weapon to Mr. Newman, well, to somebody at that point.
Okay. Now, at the time that you contacted Mr. Da Silva, based on the phone records of the defendant, had the defendant already been arrested?
Yes, ma'am.
At that time, at the time you were looking through the phone records and contacted Mr. Da Silva, had a murder weapon been recovered?
No, ma'am.
Did you have any information at that time, the time you looked through the phone records and you contacted Mr. Da Silva, did you have any information about what kind of firearm it was that was used in the murder of Rusty Sneiderman?
Yes, ma'am. We knew that it was a .40 caliber.
A .40 caliber?
Yes, ma'am.
And how was it that you knew that it was a .40 caliber?
That was based on 4 shell casings that were found at the scene at the Dunwoody daycare.
Why is it important, if it is important, for investigators to know what kind of weapon and, if possible, the actual weapon that was used in a crime?
To match it to the evidence found at the scene.
Based on what you know about ballistics, and is the examination of firearms, is that called ballistics in investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And based on what you know about ballistics, do you have to have the gun itself in order to do any sort of matching or testing of ballistics evidence?
No, ma'am.
What is it that you can use, if anything, to try to figure out if 2 casings match each other or if a particular weapon fired a casing or a projectile?
It can be determined off the firing pin of the shell casing, or the firing pin mark of the shell casings left at the scene, as well as, I believe, some extractor parts.
Okay. All right. And Investigator Potter, you're not a ballistics examiner yourself?
No, ma'am.
And you're not an expert in that area?
No, ma'am.
All right. And if I got the questions out and you answered them, I think we're both doing okay. All right. So when was it, do you recall, that you were going through the records and you contacted Mr. Da Silva?
It was February 22nd
Of what year?
2011.
2011?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the date of the murder?
November 18th, 2010.
November 18th, 2010 to February 22nd, 2011. Did investigators have anything other than the caliber of the weapon to investigate as it relates to the murder weapon itself?
No, ma'am.
You didn't have, the defendant wasn't arrested with a gun on him, for example?
No, ma'am.
And to your knowledge, was a search of the defendant's home done?
Yes, it was.
Was there any weapon recovered or any ammunition or anything related to firearms recovered from his house?
No, ma'am.
Now, do you know, or did you know at the time that the defendant was living outside his home, the home that was occupied at that time by his estranged wife and their children?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the other residence that he was living in at the time?
He was living with an older lady by the name of Ruth Siegel, I believe was her name. And
Okay.
it was over off West Paces Ferry.
I'm sorry? Go ahead.
Over off of West Paces Ferry in Atlanta.
In Atlanta?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And through your investigation, did you know that Ms. Siegel was a family friend of the defendant's?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was a search done of Ms. Siegel's residence because the defendant was living there or had access to that place during the relevant time period? Was a search done of her home?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know, was there any ballistics evidence or any weapon or anything that was related to the firearm used to kill Rusty Sneiderman? Was that found at Ms. Siegel's home?
No, ma'am.
Okay. When you contacted Mr. Da Silva, without telling me what he said, did Mr. Da Silva give you some information about the topic you were interested in?
Yes, he did.
And what, if anything, did you do as a result?
After speaking with Mr. Da Silva, I had another investigator put a lineup together, a photo lineup together, containing one photo of Mr. Neuman. I then took that lineup to Mr. Da Silva at his place of employment and showed it to him.
And what was his place of employment at that time?
I believe it was the Atlanta Diner was where he was working. He had two jobs. One was at the Atlanta Fish Market and the other one was at the Atlanta Diner.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Investigator Potter, I'm showing you what has already been admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit number 31 and 30. And do you recognize those documents?
Yes, ma'am.
What are those documents?
One is the photographic lineup that I showed to Mr. Da Silva. The other is the photographic lineup admonition that I read to Mr. Da Silva prior to showing him the lineup.
Okay, you said you read it to him?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the jurors what's an admonition and why you read it to somebody who's being shown a photo lineup.
The admonition is basically an explanation to the person viewing the lineup that it may or may not contain a photograph of the person who's being investigated, that they should not be persuaded in any way by me or any other law enforcement on the scene or viewing the lineup, and basically that the lineup is done to eliminate people as well as to implicate them.
And does your signature appear on State's Exhibit number 30?
Yes, ma'am.
And why did you sign that document?
As a witness, I was conducting the lineup.
Okay. And tell the jurors how did it go when you showed Mr. Da Silva the lineup, State's Exhibit number. Can we see the lineup, please? Should appear magically. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. When I showed the lineup to Mr. Da Silva, it was almost instantaneous that he pointed to Mr. Neuman as being the person that he recognized.
And what number is Mr. Neuman in the photographic lineup as Mr. Da Silva identified him?
Number 4.
Number 4, this guy right here?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have or did you ask Mr. Da Silva to do anything after he picked Mr. Neuman out of the lineup?
To indicate whether or not he recognized anybody, and then to sign the admonition form that he picked that person.
He did that? Okay. And you did that in your presence?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What, if anything, did Mr. Da Silva, or what did you do after talking to Mr. Da Silva after showing him the lineup and doing the admonition form as you described?
After we found out that a weapon was sold, I asked Mr. Da Silva if he still had any of the, or if he'd ever shot the gun, and if so, where, and also if he had any shell casings that had previously been shot.
Why did you ask him those questions?
Because I know that some guns come with a test fire shell casing, and they come in the box with him, and he may or may not still have that box with the shell casing. It's just done as a kind of a quality control thing to show that the gun does fire.
Okay. And did Mr. Da Silva answer you?
Yes.
Did he identify a location for you?
Yes, he did.
And what was that location?
It was the residence of his ex-girlfriend at the time in Dunwoody.
All right. And do you recall her name?
Aurora Carmen Juarez. Del
Juarez,
Carmen Juarez.
Okay. All right. And what, if anything, did you do? Did you go? Where, if anywhere, did you go?
I immediately went to Miss Carmen's neighborhood, and she met me at a grocery store. I believe it was a Kroger, and she handed me the the shell casing that she had kept.
Okay. And did it look consistent? I know you said you're not a firearms examiner, but did it look consistent to you to a .40 caliber casing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what, if anything, did you do with it?
I went straight from there. I went out to Kelly Fite's residence.
Who's Kelly Fite?
Kelly Fite is a ballistics examiner. He's
and had he been the ballistics firearm examiner who was assisting in the investigation in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And where did you take it out? To his home?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Drove it out to his house?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And what did you do when you got there?
Transferred the casing over to Mr. Fite, got a property sheet for it, and I left.
And you left?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Investigator Potter.
Whose witness is this, Mr. Brown? You may cross examine to which?
Could I have any questions, please? Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Glory, today's witness be released and excused from the subpoena. Do you want him to remain under subpoena?
You want me to ask that he remain under subpoena?
All right. You remain under subpoena. Thank you very much. Call your next witness.
You want to interview, Coach?
Sure. Come on up, lawyers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I see those fans are working right now, which means it was getting warm to me, and I thought it was just me, but there was a challenge with the air conditioning, and I made a call trying to address that. But I'm perspiring now, so I'm not even moving. What I'm going to do is go ahead and end for the day. The Assistant Deputy Jury, we're going to go ahead and give your communication devices. You can leave your notes and everything here in the jury room. Let me give you these instructions. You'll hear these on a regular basis every time we take an extended break. Excuse me, do not discuss the case. I'll allow anyone to discuss the case with you, even if you do decide to have a meal here in downtown Decatur. Do not sit next to anyone who may be discussing the case. I'll allow anyone to sit next to you who may be discussing the case. As I mentioned to you, you have two options. Either A, tell them to move away from you, or B, you need to move away from them. Do not remain upon the fifth floor when I release you for this extended break. I don't want you to hear anything you should not hear or see anything you should not see. Do not read or look at any media coverage pertaining to this case. Do not go up on the internet and do any research about this case. Do not blog about this case while it's ongoing. Do not write about this case while it's ongoing. Do not go to any location that may or may not have been any reference to. All the evidence will come to you in the form of sworn testimony and any evidence that's introduced in the course of the trial, and also that includes any evidence that is stipulated to by the parties. You're more than welcome to bring something to snack in or eat with you during the morning and afternoon sessions tomorrow. You can drink a beverage there in the jury box, but you cannot eat in the jury box. Do not consume any alcoholic beverages during the lunch break. Obviously, you're all adults and you're leaving for the day. If you do make a decision to consume alcoholic beverages, do not over-consume or indulge to the extent that it affects your ability to come back tomorrow and function 100%. And thank you in advance for turning off those cell phones, communication devices. We'll follow the same procedure tomorrow. Just make sure you put them in off position, because what happens as people are trying to communicate with you throughout the day, they'll just be buzzing and disrupting the court, and I need everyone to be focused and attentive during the course of the presentation. Deputy Garrett will turn those back over to you. Now, I know you all have notepads. Just put your number on them, turn the face down, leave them in the journal. No one's going to look at your notes but you. It's just easier for management purposes for the legal mayor. Continue to take your badges with you, take them home and wear them back tomorrow. As I may have mentioned to you, and we say this over and over, the lawyers on parties, and you're going to interact with several people over the next few days, they cannot talk or interact with you outside of the courtroom. And the only reason I have to mention that, because obviously this is courtroom 5D. This is where we're going to reassemble throughout the course of this proceeding. So for whatever reason, even small talk, you can't have any small talk. When I say small talk, yeah, I'm going to say good morning, good afternoon, have a great day, and things like that. But I don't want you to draw any emphasis or conclusions from that one way or the other, because the lawyers and the parties cannot interact with you outside the courtroom. Now, the way we try to operate, as I indicated before, you can be early, but you can't be late. It simply means just do what you can to leave from wherever you are originating from tomorrow morning, to give yourself enough time so that you can park there in the garage. And I know more fans are working, so I'll see if I can make sure the air conditioner is cooling you down. If not, dress comfortable, because as you can see, the room has no windows, which is okay. But if the heating device if the air conditioning device is not working at its full capacity, we're going to continue through it. I don't want you to be comfortable, but about the best I can do is give you a fan. And I'll give you the fans that be here tomorrow, and you can get 2 fans if you need it. But that's about the best I can do. But this is the way it is, and it caught my attention actually yesterday. There was a challenge with the system, and I thought it was back online, but that's neither here nor there. We're going to reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, you can be early, but you can't be late. Do what you can to get some rest, so that you've been great today. Everybody's been alert and attentive. I will see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock a.m. in the jury room. Just follow the instructions of Deputy Garrett. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock a.m. Just leave me know that here in the jury room. Hopefully everyone get a lot of rest. See you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock a.m. Courtroom 5D. Everyone's with me. Everyone will be with me. Everyone will be here tomorrow morning. You don't need to call me, tell me anything. Just be here on time. See you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock a.m., please. 9 o'clock a.m. All right, lawyers approach before we go into recess. All right, Kelly, we're in recess tomorrow morning. Mr. Deputy.
All rise. You may be seated.